Have you ever walked by something 100 times but never really noticed it before? That's exactly what makes this scavenger hunt so much fun. Instead of relying on riddles, players use close-up photos as clues, forcing them to notice details they might have normally overlooked. And due to the simple nature of this scavenger hunt, it makes it perfect for groups of all ages. Each clue provides coordinates to be filled out on a graph paper, and once all the clues have been filled out, a hidden message appears, revealing the location of the final prize. In this video, I'll be walking you through step by step how to create your own version of this scavenger hunt. Or if you'd prefer to skip all the tedious work, I've also created several pre-made messages with clues that you can download for a few bucks. Links will be down in the description below. So the planning stage of this scavenger hunt is obviously the most challenging, and I would say the first thing you want to take into account is the length of time that you want the scavenger hunt to take place in. I would say, generally speaking, 5 clues takes about 15 or 20 minutes for groups to find. Now, obviously this can vary depending on how difficult you make it to find the clues, as well as the size of the venue you're playing in. For reference, I have set this scavenger hunt up in a 160-acre park, and I've also done it in a single family home. And so it can be used over a wide range of locations, but that will affect, if you're playing this in a huge area, you might need a little extra time for contestants to be able to complete the scavenger hunt. Now, one of the constraints with this particular scavenger hunt is that the final message can't have any words longer than 6 letters long, and that's due to the graph that it's getting filled out on, because on the top you have the letters up here and the numbers on the side, and since there's only so many letters in the alphabet, you can only fit 6 letters across here. Here's an example of what each of the letters looks like when filled out. When I was creating this, I tried to experiment with different size letters, and I really found that it works best when a letter is 3 squares wide by 5 squares tall. Anything bigger than that ended up resulting in a lot of coordinates for each of the clues, and this was a way to kind of simplify it. But due to the smaller size, some of the letters couldn't be really discernible without some of the coordinates only being partially filled in. So you'll notice that the letter G, M, Q, and W all have kind of like a little triangle or partial space filled in. So when you're doing it, you'll have to have those specific sections pre-filled out on your scavenger hunt grids. Another thing to keep in mind when you're making your scavenger hunt is to figure out if you want the letters to be filled in black, or to have a little bit trickier version of this, you can have the empty spaces be the letters. And so this requires a little bit of a puzzle also at the end. Once contestants have a graph completely filled out, they still have to realize that it's the empty spaces they're looking at rather than the spaces they filled in. So I'll kind of give you an example here. So this is obviously the alphabet with the letters being in black, and then this is what it would look like if the letters were made from the empty spaces left behind. Now, the only tricky thing with this is that when you're using the empty spaces, you have to figure out a way of filling in the gaps in between everything else. So obviously there's columns and rows that have to be filled in to distinguish where a letter stops and starts. And so when you have the empty spaces being the letters, I have included a little clue or hint in here. So it'll say start with the photos, so that tells the group, they're looking for the locations of the photos. And then there's a clue here that says put down helping lines. On this clue, you'll notice that the D, H, and L are all capitalized and italicized. And then there's the numbers 6 and 12. So if the contestants figure it out that this is a clue telling them to completely fill in those rows and columns, then the empty spaces will it'll become much more apparent that those are the letters that they're filling in. Something else to consider when you're trying to decide if you want the letters to be black or to be the empty spaces is that if the letters are made from the empty spaces, it makes it so there's much fewer coordinates that have to be filled out, and that can be a huge plus if you're dealing with a little bit of a longer message or something like that, so that when contestants find each clue location, they're not spending 5 minutes filling out 20 different coordinates. Instead, it might just be 5 coordinates or something like that. So obviously it depends on the message, the length of your message, but that is something to keep in mind, because when you're filling out the black spaces for the letters themselves, it does turn out to be a lot more clue coordinates that have to be filled out on each sheet. So ultimately, I'd say the pros and cons for each of these is that if you're going with dark letters, it makes it much easier for contestants to solve the final message. But the con is that it requires more coordinates at each clue location. And then if the letters are made from the empty spaces, the pro is that it takes much fewer coordinates per clue, but it is a bit more tricky for contestants to figure out how to solve. Once you figure out what your message is going to be and what kind of letters you want to use, All you have to do at that point is write down each of the coordinates that needs to be filled out and then divvy them out among however many clues are going to be part of the scavenger hunt. Once that's done, print off the clues and you're ready to set up the scavenger hunt. Before we start getting into setting up the scavenger hunt itself, I did want to just give you a real life example of a scavenger hunt I've created in the past. So this is one that I actually did for some coworkers of mine, where the message for this was "bake me a cake." Now obviously this has the letter M in it, so you'll see that triangle that I talked about earlier that had to be pre-filled on the grid. So this is an example of what the grid looks like with just a few of the coordinates filled out. And then this is actually what the grid looks like with every coordinate filled out. It doesn't look like anything. It's very confusing and you don't really understand. And that's where you have to have a message indicating that there's something more that they have to figure out. So once the contestants figured out that they needed to fill out the columns of D, H, and L, and then the rows of 6 and 12, it turned into this message right here, which says, "Bake me a cake." So there's a real world example, so you get an idea of what it looks like when you're actually playing the game. Once you have all your scavenger hunt clues made up, it's really easy to set this thing up. All you're gonna do is go to a place that you wanna place a clue. You're gonna take a really close-up photo of it. Now, I will note that in this particular case, this is a house setting, so I want really close-up photos of things because there's not a lot of space. You wanna make it kind of challenging for people to find. However, if this was, say, the case of the 160-acre park where I played this, I would take photos definitely more distance away. For instance, one of them when I did it at the park was an entire boulder. Because with it being such a large area, you really need to have a better picture or fuller view of what the item is that you're looking for. Okay, so we got our picture. Now it's really easy. You're just gonna take one of your pre-made clues that you already have ready, hopefully have some tape on hand, and you're just gonna tape that to the clue location. Now, I don't want people to find this that easily, so I'm gonna give this a turn to hide the clue and, oh, what is this? Oh yeah, this is my reminder. If you guys are enjoying this video, it would really mean a lot if you would consider liking the video. That way YouTube knows that you appreciate this content and wanna see more like it. All right, back to the video. So one of the other nice things about this specific scavenger hunt is that if you don't have access to the venue where you're gonna be doing the scavenger hunt until the day of, you saw how simple it was to set this up. I literally went, took a picture and placed the clue right away and you're all set. Very easy. And then as far as getting the pictures to the contestants, I've actually done that several different ways as well. One of the easiest ways was I had all the photos saved in an album on my phone, and then when the contestants were playing, I just airdropped the photos or texted it to them and they had it on their own phones. Another way you could do it is to have a TV screen or something like that with a slideshow of the pictures just going in a rotation, and then contestants continually refer back to it. And then the final, more setup version of that would be to actually print out physical copies of the photos to give to each team. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Obviously, this scavenger hunt works better if people are working as groups of teams, which honestly makes this really ideal for like team building activities or something like that. And I've done several ways, but one of my favorite ways to figure out what the teams are gonna be, if you have a really large group, I would say at least 15 people or more, it's fun to take lines from like a poetic rhyme or something like that. One that I've used multiple times is a limerick. So if you're not familiar with what a limerick is where the first two lines of the poem rhyme, and then the third and fourth line rhyme, and then the fifth line rhymes with the first two lines. And so what I'll do is I'll print out lines from different limericks, and then I'll hand an individual line to each person at the party. And then the first task that they have is figuring out who their team is by figuring out the complete limerick. So everyone's going around yelling, you know, the last word of their rhyme, and then trying to put the whole thing together so it makes a cohesive limerick. If you don't have enough for 5 people per team, I've also done a version of this where it was 3 people on each team, and I took riddles from The Hobbit where Gollum and Frodo Baggins are, sorry, not Frodo, Bilbo, excuse me, where Gollum and Bilbo are in the cave and they're saying riddles back and forth. So I took those riddles and I separated it out into 3 lines. So I had the first 2 lines be the riddle, and the third line was the answer. So the contestants had to get the complete riddle together to figure out what their team was, and they came to me to verify that they had the correct riddle. And then I, once they had formed their team, had their paper with the grid filled out, or not filled out, with just the grid. And then I gave them the paper with a pen and then set them loose. They referred to the pictures, filled out the grid, and went from there. So there's a lot of fun ways you can do this, a lot of variants. Another thing that I've done with a different group was that in some of the clue locations, not all of them, I think I had 10 clue locations, and 3 or 4 of them required that the person who found it complete a specific activity. And so that's just another way you can make it a little more fun, spice it up a little bit, but that is a little more involved because then you have to have a person manning that station to verify whether someone completed the activity or whatnot. So there's a lot of different ways you can have fun with this. I definitely think it's a fun thing that people haven't seen before, and every time I've done it with groups, they always really enjoy it. Before I end this video, I did want to touch on one other variant of this scavenger hunt that's really fun, but takes a lot more work and setup. Definitely great for really special occasions. I actually created this scavenger hunt when my wife and I were getting ready to announce the gender of our coming baby, but it takes a lot more setup, and you'll see why, because first off, each of the teams is going to be provided their grid on a transparent sheet like this. And then each of the teams, there's going to be 4 teams, and each team is given their own separate set of clues. So I gave each team 5 clues, so I had to come up with 20 separate clues, and I had to make sure none of the clues were repeated from one team to the other. So once the teams went around, they filled out their grids, then I had kind of like an answer key. I would lay their grid on top of it on the piece of paper and check to make sure they had filled out all the spaces correctly. And if they had, then we waited until all the teams had finished filling out their grids, and then stacked the grids together to reveal the final message of, it's a girl. So this was my wife's and I way of announcing that we were going to have a little girl. It was really fun to have everyone come together in anticipation to see what the final message was going to be. I also wanted to mention in note to those pre-made kits that I've made, if you do decide to go that route, to let you know what you'll be getting when you do that. Each kit comes with several different variations, so the kit will include a variation that has 8, 10, or 12 clues, depending on how many clues you want. But then it will also include variations where the letters will be the black spaces filled in, or the letters will be the empty white spaces. So all that is included in one download. You just find the message that you want and download it, and you get all that content. Now, if you're on the website and you are thinking of a specific message that you think would work for this, but you don't see it anywhere on there or anything like it, feel free to let me know. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you want the message to be, and if I think it'll work, I would be more than happy to create a kit that you could download. Definitely let me know if you think of something that you think would be a good scavenger hunt. And then finally, like I said at the beginning of this video, I've included all the information in this video so that you could create this scavenger hunt from point A to point B without having to download anything. I hope you guys found this helpful, and if you enjoyed it, I hope I'll catch you in the next one.